Dating back over 5,000 years, several Sumerian carvings have been found that appear to show characters wearing wristwatches. All have a circular face with a strap, and some even appear to have dials and markings representing the hours of the day. Was the Sumerian civilization more advanced than we thought?
Definitely not. Now, I will admit that this does look like a wristwatch. The band is thin and the circle is thick, like a watch would be. The only problem is, how are you going to tell time with this thing? The hands are pointing in all different directions. And secondly, only when you zoom in like this does it really look like a watch. Consider this friendly looking guy. Look how many watches he has. He has two. Now, I'm not going to claim to be a watch expert, but I think one watch is enough. Now, why would a person who cares about time be wearing two watches unless it's a form of jewelry and he's using it as a way of keeping symmetry? And again, if we zoom in, the arms of the so called watch are pointing in all different directions. So, how would you be able to tell time? Here's a particularly hilarious example of this where they remove the band and they show it. Now, I know you know that the thing that's on that stick is a flower, and it looks exactly like the thing on the wrist, which is not surprising given that all of the people who are carrying this watch seem to be pollinating flowers. This fellow here is so dedicated to telling time that he carries a stick that kind of looks like a plant with one, two, three, four, five watches, and then he has two on his wrist. So this guy must live in multiple time zones, or it's just a flower. In this other picture of this god, we can see that he is so dedicated to and helpful that he puts watches where he can't even see them himself on his head. Maybe to help other people walking down the street be able to look at his head and squint and guess what time it is. Now, given the multiple time zones on his head, I'm guessing they would have to take a picture or something. I mean, since they have watches, why wouldn't they have the cameras or anything like that? So, for any poor traveler who's traveling and he sees this guy, all he needs to do is take out his binoculars, stare at this guy's head, and choose his time zone, and he'll be able to figure out what time it is. Now, some evil archaeologists have suggested that this is just some mythological symbolism of flowers, as you can see on the head and the arms, and the fact that some of them are even seen holding acorns and pollinating flowers and stuff like that. But we all know that those guys are just lying. So, but there's only one thing that I have a question, since these guys are not just symbols of some kind of deity who is doing something, but in fact are gods coming from another world in order to give us alien powers. Why do they have bird wings? Isn't it strange that they have bird wings that are typical on Earth? It's almost like this is a combination of things that humans saw on Earth and then they mixed into their mythology. Isn't that strange? Like they put flowers all over their hands and stuff, and today we're reading a wristwatch into it. And the fact that they have literal wings, which firmly puts them in the category of a mythological creature, as we see multiple mythological creatures around the world with wings and no wristwatches. This one doesn't even have a human face.
And in a place, there is supposed to be zero connection between ancient Japan and ancient Egypt. That's not supposed to exist. And if you compare that sarcophagus work, it's like it looks uncannily similar.
Impossible, almost impossible that two people would come up with the same design.
Right.
Because it's like coming up with, I don't know, I don't have a good, like if someone, like this lighter, if someone this is an unusually shaped lighter, the way the top pops, if someone just coincidentally, without any internet, came up with this on the other side of the planet, you'd be like, how the fuck? It's so oddly shaped.
Yeah. Right.
Like the button's in the same place, the lid's in the same place. There's no way.
Right.
That's what it looks like to me. And the fact that it took an enormous amount of effort to make and move and put it into place, because you're talking about incredibly heavy stone.
Now, at first, I thought they were talking about this because a lot of people on the internet have been showing this as the example that they were talking about in this video. But both of these are from Egypt. This would be a coincidence if it was found in Japan, but it's not. Both the one written in Japan and the one written in Egypt are from Egypt. So what were they talking about? They were talking about this. Now, I'm not an expert in coincidence, but this is definitely a coincidence. This is the definition of a coincidence. People before the internet come up with similar ideas. Well, what about writing? 3 or 4 people, 6 really, came up with the concept of writing and they didn't even know each other. How about this one? This one is even stranger. The number 0. Every other culture besides the Indians and the Mesoamericans, a very specific type of Mesoamericans, the Mayans, came up with the number 0. Everybody else, it went over their head. Is that not a coincidence? That would be a much stronger connection between two kingdoms than the fact that some sarcophaguses or whatever are shaped slightly similar. I mean, they're not even shaped exactly the same, but they're shaped slightly similar. And that's not even the full coincidence with the number 0, because of course, the way that it's written is in the Mesoamerican, you can tell here that it's a circle with a smaller circle inside it. Who the hell told them to design it like this? If you look at all the other numbers, there's nothing that would make you make 0 that number. I don't even know what the logic is behind this. But here's where it gets even stranger. The ancient Hindu symbol for 0 is also a circle with a smaller circle inside. In fact, it's a dot. So why did they have this similarity? What is it about the concept of 0 that makes them think to do this similarity? If you want a good coincidence, this is a good coincidence. The ancient Hindu symbol of a circle with a dot in the middle, known as Bindu or Bindu, symbolizes the void and the negative of the self, was probably instrumental in the use of a circle as a representation of the concept of 0. Of course, we kept the circle part of the number 0, and so to us, it's familiar that you need a circle, and some people say it's obvious because of a void. Now, I don't know about you, but the word void is not necessarily a circle in my head. Now, if you want to say it is, why did the Arabs get rid of the circle and keep the dot, instead representing 5 with a circle? Worse than this is that the dot that is at the end or the beginning of the Arabic numerals representing 0 looks more like the number 1 in the Mayan numerals. So again, that 0 is really a true coincidence because almost nothing else looks the same. Most cultures around the world use tally marks, a straight line, to represent numbers. The Mayans are kind of exceptional by using dots. And so this is why it brings up the question, why would they use a circle? The biggest thing to overcome, which is probably why a lot of these videos get a lot of views, is the fact that they're so far apart. Japan and Egypt are so far apart that in order to overcome that and it being slotted into coincidence, you're gonna have to give solid evidence for why these two places are together, and you can't point out one similarity or two similarities. You're gonna have to point out a whole bunch of stuff. For example, why is the writing in ancient Japan nothing like that in ancient Egypt? If they're gonna get to the point where they're even utilizing the same type of sarcophaguses, why is it almost exactly the same as the one in China? Where we can easily go, oh, so either China got it from Japan or Japan got it from China. We know that the Japanese got it from China, but that's how it would work. Not a coincidence. If you look at the whole language, it looks the same. Not to mention that they're very close to each other. Not to mention that if you look at their clothes, they look like each other. If you look at their faces, they look like each other. If you look at their history, they overlap. Everything makes sense in that context of borrowing, and it's almost too great because we see that every other place in history where people are very close to each other, they tend to have this similarity.